Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Beverly Hills Unified School District regular board meeting. It is 5:01, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. And I'd like to ask Mr. Margot if he would lead us in the flag salute.
Please stand. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
The motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Mrs. Marcus. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. Dr. Brady, would you like to report on closed session?
Yes, thank you, President Wells. The board has voted 5-0 in approval of settlement agreement OAH case 202-111-0017.
Thank you. Next, we have the teacher-student spotlight, and I'm going to ask Dr. Brady to introduce.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to turn this right over to Mr. Briggs. Come on up, and we'll kick us off today with some celebrations and awards for our students. Mr. Briggs, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I need permission from somebody to share my screen. I'm going to try to show you the pictures. Let me see if it just works.
Ms. Starkins is
It's
awesome.
It's working. Just needs a second. Okay, we should be good to go. Okay, hold on. There we go. Okay, whoops, I don't want to start with that one. I want to start with this one. All right, I'm also pinch hitting for Mrs. Doyle tonight, who couldn't be with us, and she had a student that won the Southern California Journalist of the Year award, and I'm going to read what she said about her student. It's Candace Anvari. With her work in scholastic journalism being recognized both locally and nationally for the past 2 years, it came as no surprise to me that Candace was selected to be the Southern California Journalist of the Year. She created an extensive portfolio that showcased her talents and accomplishments as a journalist, including her honorable mention for 2021 Digital Story of the Year for the National Scholastic Press Association. Candace is also an ongoing recipient of the National Journalism Honor Roll. And I looked at Candace's portfolio, and if you look at that, it's no surprise why they picked her. I chose one picture from her portfolio to show you, and it was just amazing. So let me move on to, in photography, we ruined my surprise. We enter 2 contests every year, and we did really well this year. We're really proud of our students. And the one contest we enter is called the Congressional Art Competition, and this is Cole Summers, and he's right there. Wave, everybody. There he is. He won for his picture called UFO. And this was, yeah, go ahead. He actually left the baseball game early. You can see he's still in his uniform to be here, so it's pretty cool. This award was the Members' Choice Award. Congressman Ted Lieu actually picks his favorite out of the whole batch, and this was it. So that's pretty nice. And then we have. Now on to our second contest. We also enter the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, and we had 6 students win 7 awards. We had one student that won 2, and I'll get to her in a second. This one is called Lights Up, and it was by Ori Cohen-Robb, and she got a silver key for this. The next picture is called Fog. It's by Tess Kewen. Tess, she's in the audience. There she is. I love this. I want to show you something. Look at that little person on the bicycle. Isn't that great? Great capture. Next, we have Karen Lifshitz. Karen, where are you? There she is. Karen got 2 awards. She got, now is this the Pursuit of Happiness, right? Look at me. No? This is Pride. I'm sorry. This is Pride. I keep getting mixed up. This is Honorable Mention. And then she also won a silver key for this one. And this is called Pursuit of Happiness. So, really nice work. Next, we have a picture called When I Grow Up, I Want to Be a Teacher. This is by Adele Murphy, and she won a silver key for this one. Next is Normality by Angelique Silvestri. This was honorable mention. And our final one, Vlad, I'm going to destroy your last name. He tried to coach me. It's Vladimir Zakharov, but I know I'm not saying it right. I apologize, buddy. He's right there. Wave at everybody. There we go. So that's it. And I would just like to say personally for me, to the board and everybody in this district, thank you so much for supporting the arts, because that's why I came here 16 years ago. I read the Norman Guide, and I could see that this district was committed to teaching art in the right way. So thank you so much for hosting us tonight.
Thank you so much. I would love to ask the students to just come up so we can, give you a round of applause. Come on up. You want me to get a picture?
How'd you do in the game today?
Miss Brooks is gonna take the picture.
No. Yeah. Thank you. Did anyone want to add any comments?
I just want to say I know how great the photography program is, and you can really see just how great it is based on how successful our students have been in these amazing pictures that we saw this evening. So thank you very much for everything that you guys are doing and everything that you continue to do.
I just love the presentation, and our laurels are showing, and it's wonderful, and I'm really impressed with the quality of those photographs. So congratulations to all of you. Keep it up. I love it.
I know we don't have enough time, but it would have been really cool to have the students explain a little bit about like what that they were trying to capture when they did it and how they named it or something. But I just that unbelievable work, and thank you to all the students and the teachers behind the greatness.
No further comments, but very impressive, and thank you for sharing.
I was just going to say it was great to have like a full arts weekend with the play, and now we get more arts and keep it coming. I wonder if Mr. Briggs' photo of the group will be better than Mr. Roach's. I saw them both. I don't know. We should have a contest just on that.
I agree. I'd like to just applaud Mr. Briggs and all of the students. I think, to your point, no, we've had a week of the arts, and I just think it's a shining example of excellence in our school district and what we strive for.
Yeah, I wish Mr. Briggs would have stuck around for a few minutes just to hear some of these accolades. But, Mr. Briggs is one of those teachers where it's just the consistency of high quality year after year. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do that consistently, and he brings that every year.
Okay. I'm going to move the agenda around just a little bit and move to accommodations and recognition so that we can recognize Mr. Joe Safier.
And good evening. It is with great pleasure that I introduce, or to many of you, I'm reintroducing, because you've known him for a long time, Mr. Safier, one of the first people that I met in the district as a very strong volunteer in our school district. So, which is more than 13 years. He's been in the capacity of the COC beginning in 2009, and I believe that was till 2015, and then on the finance committee. So for the next 6 years, serving as chair and other leadership positions, and just to show you the knowledge and the interest of always wanting to help BHUSD improve. Joe even got involved with our special education department and our SELPA that we have with Santa Monica, Malibu, and also with Culver City, and he helped develop and was very influential in putting together a very comprehensive manual for the special education department. So his expertise and his knowledge and his feedback to our school district has been coming for many, many years, well over a decade, and now he has served his last term on the finance committee, but we certainly hope that means that he's not going to go away, because there's a lot of knowledge yet to be tapped in Joe, but somebody that I first met in the district and has consistently given us just really good feedback, even information and articles on technology and safety and security. And so he's kind of comes full circle with the support that he gives our district. So I know that there are some board members that would like to say congratulations, but from the superintendent and the school district, Joe, we offer you this certificate, which is very minor for what you've been able to give us, but we thank you very much for your service. You want to say a few things? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Breggy and the board. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve this district. My daughter entered Beverly Vista in 1993 when my wife Ferd, who's in the audience, and I got involved in the PTA. We moved from there to BHEF. Fern was instrumental in doing decorations there for a number of years for the Apple Ball, which hopefully will come back. When our son ended up in special education back in about 2003, I was asked to join the District Advisory Committee, a committee that doesn't exist any longer, that advised in special education needs. And that was the genesis of the transition handbook. It took a number of years to put that together. And I guess I didn't do a bad enough job there that I was asked to join the COC when Measure E was passed back in 2009. I'm a CPA by training, but I don't really practice traditional CPA work. I spent 6 years there. One of my proudest accomplishments was the development of an annual report which we provided to the district about the bond and how the bond was being utilized in the district. And then when I rolled off of that, I was asked to join the Finance Committee in 2015, where I've served for another 6 years. So, as I said, it's been a pleasure, it's been an honor, it's been a privilege, and I'm not going away. I have a granddaughter that's in 7th grade, and I do have some institutional knowledge that I hope is valuable to the district, so I'll still be around. But thank you very much. I'm touched with this recognition.
Joe, if you could just stay there, I think some of the board members would like to make a comment as well.
Mr. Safier, it's truly amazing how much of your time and how long you've been involved with this district. I mean, when Dr. Breggy said 2009, that's the year I started kindergarten here, for a reference in that. And as you said, you've been involved for much longer than that. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. As I've said before, it really takes a special kind of person to volunteer their time for just anyone else's benefit, and you clearly have. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Joe. We go back to a few years ago when we started to walk with the mayor, and I have to tell you, you epitomize the way the district is using what we have in our community to help us. And for that, we are truly very lucky. And I would love to know that we aren't seeing the end of the last, because I know you only too well. You will continue to be involved, and for that, we will also be very grateful. So I would just want to congratulate you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you up there with some other position, because I know you will.
Thank you.
I wish I had something new to add, but just thank you so much for all the hard work and all the commitment to our school district. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Mr. Safier, thank you so much for your service and your expertise. And clearly, yes, you do epitomize the great resources that we do have in our community. So thank you.
Fern, I'm sorry we ran out of committees to put them on. We'll come up with something, I promise. Joe, thank you for your service, but more than that, thank you for the walks and advice and talks that you've given me over the years. Joe lives around the corner from me, and when we run into each other from time to time and have terrific conversations about everything, and those have meant a lot during my tenure. So I really appreciate all of your wisdom and contributions. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Joe, one, for your service and your dedication and your passion for our school district. I love that you're still a parent here, which I think is fantastic. But personally, I just would like to thank you for being so welcoming to me and as a board member and on the finance committee, and being so generous with all of your expertise and wisdom that you so have readily shared with me. And I really appreciate that. And I look forward to continuing to have your support for our school going forward. So thank you so much for all that you've done. And I'm sure that we'll have another committee for you in the not too distant future.
Thank you very much. As I
Thank
say,
you.
It's been a pleasure and an honor to serve. Thank you. All right.
The next item on the agenda is for public comment. And the first person that we're going to hear from, may I borrow your list? Thank you so much. Our first speaker will be a Zoom speaker, and it will be Blanca Farrell. And Blanca, you have 3 minutes.
Do not see them on the Zoom, President Wells.
Okay, then I'm going to move on, and if she shows up before we finish, then we'll go back. For in person, the first person in person today that we will hear from is Darla Garcia. And Darla, you have 6 minutes. Eugene Garcia has ceded his time.
Ready?
Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak for you tonight. This is the first in a series of public comments I plan to present to the board and community. I am the parent of a Beverly Hills High School student who has been greatly impacted by the lack of transparency and integrity in district leadership over the past 5 years. More specifically, the BHUSD administration under Michael Bragy's leadership has been sharp decline and excellence, honesty, and integrity in which Beverly Hills has been accustomed to for decades. Based on board meetings over the past year, this administration has done everything in its power to ensure the board, community, and staff, students are completely in the dark about every question pertaining to the construction program and its bond funding. This board talks of transparency, but how is that possible when you have an administration that is not transparent even to its own board? Payments from funds of a school district must be ordered by the board. Why is it that Wade is now only telling the board this important detail when it attempts to exercise its right to hold payment to a certain questionable vendor? It begs the question, what else has the administration failed to tell its board? Brady was hired from his previous district in Chicago, largely because of his alleged expertise in school construction and reconfiguration. But why would the board at that time hire a superintendent from another state, knowing full well that Brady didn't have the necessary administrative credentials and expertise to lead a problematic and complex construction project in a California school district? Why would the board at that time hire a superintendent without the required California teaching and administrative credentials per Ed Code 35028 when there was a pool of good qualified candidates that here in Beverly Hills, let alone the countless potential candidates statewide? Why would the past board approve a resolution on January 10, 2017, exempting Brady from the requirement of having a teaching and administrative credential when most superintendents in the state have these required credentials? Why did Beverly Hills settle for less at such a pivotal juncture when there were so many legitimate potential candidates? In addition, Luke Pavone also did not have the required California teaching administrative credentials required for his post as Director of Human Resources that oversaw certificated and classified staff. Why did the past board approve on June 13, 2017, copy of the exact same resolution they had approved for Brady for Luke without even bothering to change Brady's name or signature from the original resolution? Was that even legal? Not to mention the exemption used for Brady, Ed Code 35029, specifically allows local governing boards to waiver any credentialing requirements for the chief administrative officer only and no other administration. So does that mean that Brady had full knowledge that Luke was overseeing certificated staff as HR director without having the proper certification himself? And does it mean that after 5 years, Brady has yet to get the proper teaching administrative credentials? How is it proper or fair for Brady to lead and discipline staff that have the proper California teaching administrative credentials while Brady has none of those, nor the decency to attempt to get them? This all begs the question, if Michael Brady was even properly vetted at all when he was originally hired, was there a proper background check done on him to ensure that the claims about himself is true? If he is even able to get a California teaching credential or an administrative credential, or is something else preventing this? What else doesn't the board know? For example, does the board know that Brady as CAO approached TDS contracts, approved TCDS's contract, knowing full well that Don Blake had no construction license and no verifiable extensive experience with K through 12 construction? Does the board know that as superintendent, Brady was the final signature on the TCDS contract despite clear conflicts of interest between Terry Tao, who at the time the district legal counsel with AALRR? Yet Terry also wrote the TCDS contract and presented it to the board for approval. How could Brady allow this blatant conflict of interest that happened right in front of him at a board meeting? How is this not worse than the Christensen scandal that Brady was brought clear across the country to correct? Is the board aware of the various current lawsuits? It's hard to tell since the lawsuits are not posted on the board agenda as required by Ed Code. But does the board know that most of these lawsuits started under Brady's watch? Is the board aware of the I-0 lawsuit? The district lost the lawsuit, which potentially cost the district millions. But no one knows for sure because administration has hidden the lawsuit and the amount paid out to I-0. With news like this, it is any surprise there is no money left to complete the construction projects. Besides not being qualified to manage a K-12 construction program, how was Don qualified in any way to manage a school security program? Why was the district paying Don for security at all when he was supposed to be focused on construction? And if the district paid Don for security, why did it owe anything to I-0 in the lawsuit? Was there even an RFP for security? Or did Brady literally just hand Don the contract for security without any proper procurement as required by law? Do you see a pattern? One thing is clear to see is that this administration is neither ignorant of, chooses to ignore, or thinks it's above the law. It is time that this board and community hold its administration accountable. There is way too much information to share in this limited time I have here today. But I would be more than happy to point the board and community in the right direction to find the truth that this administration seems too adamant to hide. If you are interested, you can contact me at darlagarcia521@yahoo.com. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person that we'll hear from this evening is Elena Castanon. Elena, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Board of Education, Dr. Breggy, district administrators, and community members. My name is Elena Castanon, and I am a middle school STEM teacher, and I am the certificated president of Beverly Hills Education Association. I'd like to address our greater educational community with my comments this evening. Excuse me for a moment. It's been quite a while since I spoke at a board meeting, and this is largely due to the experience that I had the last time I made comments. I was exposed to imagery of self-harm, which I perceived as threats, while I was delivering my public comments. It is my firmly held belief that any person engaging in the education community should not have to face social media smears, newspaper attacks, threats of physical harm, visual representations of self-harm, or threats of career ruin. Please ask yourself, would you want to be treated that way? Would you want your family to be treated that way? Since then, I've had conversations with numerous people, teachers, parents, community members, administrators, friends, family. And my takeaways from these conversations is that these type of social issues are extending to all corners of our lives. Every person on our planet is emerging from a global pandemic that has turned our lives upside down and inside out. Take this opportunity now to rebuild, heal, and collaborate. Take time to seek to understand one another. Stop stoking fears. Stop perpetuating half-truths and rumors. Remember, each person we encounter has history, life stories, hurt, families, and their own hopes and dreams. It's time to once again see each other as people first. Let's assume positive intent. It costs nothing and can mean everything and make all the difference in the world. It is my plea to you. Please choose kindness and thoughtfulness in our interactions, especially with those in the education community. We share a common love and devotion to the children in this community. We must build upon this and work together to educate and prepare the next generation for our success in their lives. Our children are always watching. They are always listening. Let's please do better. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you, Elena. The next item on our agenda is item 10, our consent calendar.
So I'll move to approve the consent calendar minus items 10, G, H, I, and J,
Can we also pull E, please?
and E.
I'll second the motion.
It's E-G-I-J, is that correct?
E, G, H, I, J.
H. Thank you. Okay, the motion was made by Noah Margot and seconded by Mrs. Marcus. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Eli Raymer.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve item 10E, the out-of-county trip for robotics team.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Dr. Stern. You want to start with comments, Eli?
Sure. So the robotics team had another competition this past weekend, and this item on the agenda was to approve the trip to go to the Worlds competition, which is in Houston, Texas. But unfortunately, the team was not able to qualify for that competition this year. They did win the Imagery Award and were the captain of the 7th place Alliance in the quarterfinals, which is a great accomplishment, and we did extremely well and are very proud of what the team accomplished this year. But I did want to pull that off consent, considering I don't believe that trip will be occurring.
That being the case, then we just table, just yank it. Okay, so I'm gonna withdraw my motion.
I'll withdraw the second.
And
I didn't make the second, I believe.
Dr. Stern.
I'll withdraw the second.
okay,
Okay, the motion has been withdrawn.
so that's
The next item on the agenda is item,
I'll do motion to approve items 10, G, and H, the NASDAQ amendments 4 and 3.
I'll second. Okay, the motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by myself. And I pulled these items. I just had a question about the hourly rate. And Wade, perhaps you can answer to that. Is sorry, is it the same rate as the previous contract, the hourly rate?
Yes, President Marcus, members of the board, the rates have not changed, the hourly rates. There's a $49 rate and a $51 rate for our supervisor.
Thank you for confirming that.
I'm going to say President Wells for the record.
Yes.
Because I raised the question in my
Right, you
questions
said-
and answers. I did raise the question.
It's okay. That was my only question. So does anyone have any other questions? I'll call for the vote for items for the approval of NASTEC Amendment Number 4, summer school coverage, as well as approval of NASTEC Amendment Number 3, contract services for the 2022-2023 school year. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Eli Raymer.
I'll make a motion for the approval of item 10I for the annual maintenance charges contract for the Best Advantage system for 22-23.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Mr. Halimi. Go ahead, Gabe.
I pulled this one. Wait, I was just curious if this was the same amount that we paid for the last school year, and is this just something that we do every year?
Yes, so this is an annual amount we pay to LACO. Actually, for 22-23, the amount will go down by about $11,000. So generally, we pay around $5,000. We paid a little more the last few years for the implementation of BEST, but that's ending this year, so it'll actually go down quite a bit next year.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer.
And I'll make a motion for the approval of the K-5 science textbook adoption.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Eli Raymer.
I turned it on.
Who pulled this item?
I did.
Go ahead, Mrs. Hodges.
I just wanted to make a comment. I didn't have a question about it, but I was on the committee that met for the selection of this book, and I saw that the way it was done, the book goes back to the teachers at the end. We give them 3 books or 2 books to choose from, but I have to tell you, I was disappointed in the selection. I thought the book that, at least the one that I saw, was a much better series, and I was disappointed in the selection, so I just wanted to be able to make that comment, and I will abstain to approve the selection.
Any other comments?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Gabe.
We've previously talked about the process for a textbook adoption, and I, asked about the I'm just going to turn yours off. That's okay. I asked about involvement of the parents in the process, and following the board meeting where this last came up, I think it was 2 board meetings ago because I wasn't here at the last one. A number of parents reached out to me saying that they're a little bit disappointed, even the ones on the selection committee, because they mentioned that they're allowed to sit in a room with the textbook for a few hours, and it's not really enough time to give their feedback. That was something that I heard, and now hearing this from Mrs. Marcus, I wonder if we could have a conversation at some point about, just the process that we're using, and, making sure that maybe given the kind of expenditure and how long we have these textbooks, I know we have a process in place, but it sounds like maybe we could be doing even better.
Yeah, I do think that's good feedback. I was talking to Mr. Seaman about perhaps having a kind of a larger window of time where parents could come in and review the textbooks as well. And we talked a little bit about that.
Did you want to get up?
We actually posted it for everyone to view. So the whole community, instead of just doing a conference room, we actually posted it on the high school website. So everybody in the whole community can actually view any of the resources that we're looking to adopt. So if you actually go to the Beverly Hills High School website and you go to curriculum adoption, you'll actually click that, and it gives you viable links to all of the current adoptions that we have just purchased, so they can go ahead and see all the English, social studies, and then the same thing would happen with the science as well. As soon as we are able to approve, we can go ahead and post that link to both Hawthorne and Horace Mann for any additional opportunities for feedback as well. In addition, both social studies, English, math, and science, the adoption process started during the pandemic. So even when we are receiving a lot of all of a sudden interest, I'm going to use that word, for involvement, we are already in the process with the vendors, and we are already in the process with our committees. So a lot of them, like Mrs. Marcus's committee on the science, we started that almost 1.5 years ago. And so we are able to just finalize it because the adoption actually went through with the state in 2019. We unfortunately are able to just get to that point of being able to close that. Also, the California Department of Education posts all available adopted curriculums that we can purchase, and it's on the California Department of Education website. So if you go and search, science CDE, it'll list everything that we have the opportunity to possibly purchase with public funds, so people can view those through that process as well. So there's a lot of venues that we can provide opportunities for families to be able to view, students as well. Eli, we have a lot of students that participate, especially at the high school level. I hope that helps a little.
Just a question about that. So parents, anyone from the community can go online and see which textbooks are being considered. Can they also view like a digital version of the textbook, or do they need to come into the school to view it somewhere? How does that work?
We can't provide an external link, so like at the high school, until we have the rights to that material.
So can or cannot?
You can view the high school social studies in English because we've purchased and we have access to that. You can go through the California Department of Education website to be able to look at all of the options that we have to be able to select from, whether you go to the vendors' websites to be able to see that. We physically can only house the paper copies because it's copyrighted. So as soon as we put it onto our website, we basically own that, if that makes sense. So I can't give you the National Geographic link today on Horace Mann or Hawthorne, but both of those sets are set up at Hawthorne and Horace Mann for viewing the physicals, plus the other two options that Mrs. Marcus had talked about. We had Inspire was another, McGraw-Hill was another. Those are set up in our schools for viewing, but you can also see them through the California Department of Education. We just can't post it externally on our website until we purchase.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dustin.
Let me ask quickly, Mrs. Marcus, I'm curious, because I wasn't involved in this, what was it about this series that you did not prefer?
I like the in-depth study and the in-depth of the material that was there. It seemed much more comprehensive. The labs were much more interesting, and the digital version was better as far as I was concerned. And I thought it was just a better series all around. And I was not alone. I didn't want to mention, but there were a couple other people that also felt the same way. And when they took the books back, I was almost certain that they would have picked McGraw-Hill. I didn't have and then when I found out that they picked National Geographic, I was surprised.
So can I ask Mr. Seaman, what was it? I listen to Mrs. Marcus because she comes from a teacher standpoint, and textbook adoptions, it's so important for the teacher input. A textbook is a tool that teachers use and teachers are trained to use. It's not just another book. So I value what teachers have to say about any textbook adoption. What was the consensus in the committee, hearing from what Mrs. Marcus is saying as to the rationale behind one over the other?
Absolutely. And so part of the textbook adoption process is, again, we take, and I'm going to kind of backtrack, we take the California Department of Education's approved list. From that list, we invite those vendors in to be able to do presentations to a committee for us to be able to par that list down. And then we take that pared down list. So in our group, we narrowed it down to 3. We take then those physical materials and then they grant us limited online digital access. So then our teachers can go back and actually pilot the lessons within the classrooms. So even us as a committee, so myself included and Mrs. Marcus, what we're doing is we're just helping them kind of part down and then providing those teachers with focusing their energies on 1 to 2, maybe 3 publishers instead of the laundry list of 12 or 14 or 15, depending on the subject area. When they go back and they pilot a couple of, so we'll say like 3rd grade, can you please all try to do this lesson or this chapter? And then they're able to come back as groups and then be able to work through, and then I come in and facilitate the conversation. And so within the grade level, so you have 6 at Horace Mann and 6 at Hawthorne, all but 2 at Horace Mann had selected National Geographic, and all but 2 at Hawthorne had selected National Geographic, and they weren't even the same grade bands. So it wasn't like I could say, okay, maybe 2nd grade will adopt a different one. They all selected National Geographic. And I think that from me and Mrs. Marcus's example is there's also in those committees when the publishers are presenting, you sometimes believe the seller. Like you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best next thing to slice bread, right? And then when you get into the trenches with the materials, I think that's when it changes some of their perspectives of, is it engaging for kids? Is it easy for kids to use? So it really becomes more student focused and not as visually for us. Yep.
Thank you.
I'm going to call for the vote. Actually, I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Raymer?
Yes.
Mrs. Marcus?
Abstain.
Mr. Halimi?
Yes.
Dr. Stern?
Yes.
Mr. Margot?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. The motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention by Mrs. Marcus and a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. Thank you.
I'll make a motion for the approval of agreement for employment of Assistant Superintendent Education Services.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Mr. Margot, seconded by Mr. Halimi. Any discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. May I have a motion for the approval of agreement for employment for Assistant Superintendent of Student Services?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead.
The motion was made by Mr. Margot, and did you two settle that down there?
Yeah. I won that one.
And just seconded by Mr. Halimi. Any discussion?
I just feel so strongly about Laura. I had to get the second in. So.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. Congratulations to both of you.
Congrats.
And to us. The next item on the agenda is maintenance and operations. Item 12A, approval of color options for BVMS and Hawthorne Elementary School.
I'll
Go ahead, Mrs. Marcus.
I will make a motion to approve the color options for BVMS and Hawthorne Elementary School.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Mrs. Marcus and seconded by Eli Raymer. Discussion? Mrs. Marcus, you'd like to start?
You have a question?
No, I've got comments about it.
Well, go ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, I agree with gray for BV. I can't say I agree with gray or blue for Hawthorne. I truly don't think that the gray trim on the outside looks as aesthetically appealing as the historic plain white. Is it possible that we do without the trim, or maybe go on with the doors being gray, but then leaving the area around the roofing and around the bell tower white as well? That's my personal preference. I've polled some people, and the majority of them think that the white looks better as well. So I just wanted to make that known and see if that was an option as well.
Thank you, Eli. Mrs. Marcus?
Yeah, well, I have a question about the fact, thank you. I have a question about the need to paint Hawthorne. This is a school that, eventually in 2 years will be changing, and is this something that aesthetic needs important right now, Or is there a way we can do some of it and not all of it, but to whatever, to dress it up a little bit? But I was questioning the expenditure on Hawthorne.
And then Mr. Haas is also available for any questions on some of the paint and trim. So he's here as well. I would say as it relates to Hawthorne, I think we need to be really mindful of the fact that this is a building that we own, and that it is a building that we need to keep up with, the maintenance for all of our schools. There is a bright future for our school on Rexford, and so I think that this is minor to keep up with the painting as we're doing with all of our other schools. So it would be my recommendation that we continue, upgrading all of our schools.
I'd like to add to that. I think it's really important that we maintain the Hawthorne School. We're not going to be, the students are going to be in there for another 2.5 years, and that's their school experience, and that's the neighborhood that's their neighborhood school. And although we know that we are planning for El Rodeo and the students are moving in there, it doesn't mean that that their experience should be anything less. And at this point, I think we have an obligation to maintain school facilities that are providing an environment that offers excellence in education. That includes their environment where they're learning. And I think it's important. And when I drive by Hawthorne, I would agree it needs some refresh. As far as the colors are concerned, my recommendation would be to refer this back to the committee or to Ken Haas, and to really ask professionals, be it the architects many architects that we work with, and get a recommendation on what's the proper color for those buildings and the style of those buildings. I understand the desire to try and keep with our school colors, but the school colors may not be the best color for those buildings. And so we're adding trim onto buildings and architecture that it may not be what really makes those buildings look their best. And ultimately, I think we want the buildings to look the best they can.
I'd wholeheadedly agree with your sentiment, President Wells, about keeping the schools well maintained. There are schools and teachers and administration actively there, and I think some fresh paint is a small price to pay. I also just, about the process, I guess I'm just kind of scratching my head a little bit, because I would imagine that Miss Caber and Miss Scon probably have an opinion on what they want the school to look like, along with to Mr. Haas. I would suggest, like I think Mrs. Wells is saying, let's pass this back to the committee and just get a recommendation on the one thing that they want to do. And if everyone is aligned, I would be more comfortable with that than us, sitting here to be choosing a color.
And we're happy to do that. In the past several years ago, we were asked to not make those decisions and bring them to the board.
I think what I'd love to see is a recommendation from staff on which one they would like to go with, and then happy to put the rubber stamp on it, right? If we're going with bright pink at Hawthorne, I would want to know and maybe stop that. But short of that, I think it would be great to know what the staff recommendation is, like which color.
And and I would like to hear from
the architects,
an architect or someone that deals with
these
buildings. Looking at a photograph with an imposed color on it is not, in my opinion, a way to pick a color on a building. That I think we have to take into consideration our neighbors that live in those neighborhoods, and they want something that's aesthetically pleasing and that is aligned or in line with the level of our neighborhoods that these buildings are in. And so we have to consider that as well.
I agree with everyone's sentiment. I, for one, don't think that the blue for the Hawthorne is necessarily the right color, but I mean, a larger commentary is just that I think that, reviewing with the architecture and also the staff makes a lot of sense. I don't think it necessarily has to align with the color that we see of the schools on the graphics and the printed media, but I do think that it should speak to the school, but, it would be great to get the feedback from the staff.
Understood.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for preparing this and bringing this. I appreciate the efforts. I agree with my colleagues. When I saw the picture of Hawthorne that looked like Santorini, I said, wait a minute, this is, and picking colors by committee are just, it's not, yes, it's a recipe, exactly. I believe we might still have an open PO with DLR at Hawthorne, so maybe we could just, they're already on board anyway, so we can just forward it to them if we want to engage architects. I'm looking at that. It might be the fastest way, but yeah, all those buildings have a specific kind of architecture, and they're not the same. Those two schools are absolutely not the same, so they do need, somebody with better expertise than any of us. I mean, we have a good shot throwing a dart at a selection and picking a color is this. That's
No, I hear you loud and clear, and we'll bring you.
Okay. So we need to. We have a motion on the floor, so we should withdraw the motion.
Did you have something to add, Dawn? No? Okay.
I believe I made the motion, so I will withdraw the motion.
I'll withdraw the second.
Okay, the motion has been withdrawn. Moving on to the next item. Item 12B, approval to purchase rooftop safety components.
I'll move to approve the purchase of rooftop safety components.
I'll second. The motion was made by Mrs. Marcus and seconded by Mary Wells. Any discussion?
Just a question.
Marcus?
Do you have a question? Is this at all of the schools, or is there a specific number of schools that this is being done at?
I can let Mr. Haas answer that. I think it's all the schools but the high school. But Mr. Haas, do you want to weigh in?
Good evening, President Wells, members of the board, Dr. Brady. Yes, each of the schools has certain elements of their roofs that will be have these systems installed. If there's a flat roof, that's specifically where those installations will be. As an attachment, there are school maps indicating the roof areas at each site that would be receiving these. If you click on the attachment and go to the last several pages, there are school maps where we've indicated in color where those would go, including some of the district office.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Eli Raymer. The next item is 13, business and finance. Item A is for information only. It's information item, election of 2018 general obligation bonds, final financing summary.
President
Roach?
Wells, members of the board, we have, I believe we have either Chet or Chris here. There's Chet from Kegent to give us an update. Go ahead, Chet.
Great, and I'll just do a quick screen share, and hopefully this will work. Can everyone see the presentation on the Zoom?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so real quick, good evening, President Wells, members of the board, Dr. Breggy. We had a very successful sale of the district's last issuance of Measure BH bonds, so this very quick presentation will summarize the results. The bonds were sold 2 weeks ago on March 23rd, 2022. $115 million tax-exempt Series B, $110 million taxable Series B-1. Before the bonds were put out to investors, Dr. Breggy and Mr. Roach did a fantastic job representing the district's credit strengths to both Moody's and Standard & Poor's, who assigned AA1 and AA+ credit ratings, noting not only the strength of the local economy of the district, but also very particularly the strong financial position and conservative management of the district. So kudos on that. That did position the district in a very volatile market. Here's where the Series A bonds were sold pre-pandemic. Interest rates dropped, and then due to inflation, geopolitical conflict, and rate actions from the Fed, interest rate rose following the last board approval at the last meeting. Notwithstanding the volatile market, the district did receive a very competitive bid for both series of bonds. The tax-exempt bonds received 7 bids, 9 bids from firms ranging from Citigroup down to TD Securities. Citigroup did provide the lowest winning bid at just shy of 3%. The differential from best to worst was a fairly wide 0.14%, so this did validate that the bid process worked to the benefit of the district. The taxable B-1 received 7 bids, with Morgan Stanley providing the lowest cost bid at 3.6%, and the spread from best to worst 0.304%. And the district has done a lot of legwork behind the scenes, presenting the financial plan to the committee meetings, the board, the credit rating agencies. Now that the bonds have been successfully priced, the last step is April 13th. Funds are coming to the county treasurer for use for your very important projects. And with that, welcome any questions.
No questions? We have no questions, but thank you very much for all of your work, and thank you to Wade and Dr. Brege for all of your work as well. I really appreciate it.
Have a great evening.
Thank you, Chet. The next item on our agenda is the approval of a lease agreement extension with William Scotsman for 8 modular buildings occupied by the M&O department at the Beverly Hills High School. May I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the lease agreement extension with William Scotsman for 8 modular buildings occupied by the M&O department at Beverly Hills High School.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Marcus and seconded by Dr. Stern. Any questions or comments?
Just one comment. I had asked staff about the end game for the M&O department. You know, we keep shuffling them around as we're dealing with the construction on the campus, and I just think it behooves us as a board to get to a conversation at some point of where we envision M&O winding up, so we can plan for that as we move forward with the programs.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Eli Raymer.
Okay, I'll make a motion for the purchase of iPads and laptops for TK through 2 and 6th graders from Apple and Ari Jones.
I'll second the motion.
Any questions or comments? The motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Mrs. Marcus. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Mrs. Marcus, are you in favor?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Eli Raymer.
I'll move for the approval of amendment number 1 to the agreement with WCI Incorporation for final well plugging support services on the former Veneco drill site.
I actually have a question about that.
Well, let me second it. No, I'll second it then. Go ahead, Mandy.
I'm just wondering if there's an expiration date for this contract. I mean, like, does it need to be approved today, or what is the rationale for approving it this evening?
We currently have outstanding invoices that need to be paid, so we need to go ahead and approve this to get those invoices paid at this point.
Is the agreement that we currently have expiring, or?
No, there's no end date as far as I remember. I can go back and check it out. There's a dollar amount, but no end date.
So this is an amendment that's adding to the dollar amount?
Correct.
I see.
I have a question on that. Is there any opportunity, I know the mention of insurance, is there to recoup some of this loss through insurance?
We'll have to take a look and see if it's applicable to the flood or possibly even to any other activity going on at the site. But we'll take a look, and if we can put it towards an insurance policy of some type, we will.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to that update. If there's no other questions, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0. Eli, I did not hear you.
Aye.
Aye, with a preferential vote from Eli Raymer. The motion was made by Mrs. Marcus and seconded by Mr. Margot. The next item on the agenda.
I'll make a motion for the ratification of Amendment 4 to the agreement with SBA Architects for the Beverly Vista Middle School reconfiguration upgrades.
I'll second. The motion was made by Mr. Margot, seconded by Mary Wells. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Marcus?
Could you explain a little bit about the miscellaneous figure there and where those upgrades are going to take place?
I was struggling between being able to see now in a distance and not being able to see close up.
Join the club.
And so I don't know where to hold this exactly. But, so the
new normal.
Yeah, right, the new normal. I'll just repeat what's in the rationale, is that this amendment captures the services that were necessary as a result of uncovering unknown conditions in buildings B, C, D, and E, such as concrete walls, black iron framing, slurry encased piping, etc., which are examples of some of the unknown conditions not shown on the district's as-built, all of which required redesign, DSA review, and/or approval in order to keep the project moving forward. There were a total of 3 construction change documents, which were not only required DSA approval, but also involved additional site visits by the design team. The cost included in this fee also captures additional contract administration performed by the design team for services performed to date and through DSA closeout.
I wanted people to see what's going on.
Okay.
Is that work completed already? Or is it in process?
Yes.
It's completed?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0 with preferential vote from Eli Raymer.
So I'll make a motion for the approval of Amendment 3 to the Agreement of Professional Services with K-12 School Facilities.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Mr. Halimi. Any questions or comments?
Just a quick question, and you can shout it out, you don't have to get up, but what is the current amount that we're going after SSMP for?
For B3, B4, the estimate is $16 million.
Okay.
For El Rodeo, we're just beginning, so we don't have a figure for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Eli Raymer. The next item on the agenda.
I'll make a motion for the approval of Amendment 10 to the leaseback agreement for BHUSD and Pro West for the modernization of buildings B3 and B4. I summarized. I skipped the parentheses.
It's been
It's
been bifurcated.
Item 14E.
I'll second.
Thank you.
The motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Mr. Halimi. Any questions?
I do.
Mr. Margot?
Dr. Breggy, or staff, the exclusion of the bridge that was taken out, my understanding it's to be used for educational purposes for the 22-23 school year. And are there plans to use it after that? And does the work being done under this contract overlay with that time period?
So I can answer part of that question. So when the initial discussion came up, we have 2 bungalows in the village area that we're using for some special education classes. And these are some classes that utilize some life skill needs like washers and dryers. And so we're trying to take these last 2 bungalows and move them out of the village and out of bungalows. So we had a discussion about, the bridge and, how long that would be there. Because when B4 and B3 open, that alleviates some configuration issues with classrooms currently at the high school. So the initial discussion was really kind of the sequencing of not knowing like when that's going to come down. And so advocating for the high school staff to be able to move those 2 classrooms, into and out of those bungalows, there was a thought that if it's, that's the bridge is staying, and there's, no impact to the construction, then to move those classrooms into the bridge. If it's for a year, that's a lot that we'd have to move them again then in a year. But the initial discussion was around the possibility of if there isn't going to be an impact and the bridge is there, can we utilize that space?
Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out when we get to this particular part of the contract, the work under this part of the contract, and I guess, is that work being done concurrently, or does it not, this work doesn't kick in till another year? How does that happen that you've used the bridge, they're done with the bridge is emptied, and there's no plan to demo it at that point? That's what I'm wondering. How are we going to work that out if it's excluded from this?
Right.
So, well, that's the part that when in our discussions, I wasn't aware it was being pulled from, from this part of the plan.
The last buyout.
This was the question that I had when we were in our meeting was advocating for the high school is if there's going to be an impact. If there's not going to be an impact, then why wouldn't we be able to use it? So not knowing that is going to be pulled out of the final plan.
So I don't know if anybody can address that about where it falls in the sequence of the timeline, and then what do we do if it's out of this plan and this is the last GMP for B3, B4? Right. How do we address it?
And I'd like to add as well, if this is, we've been waiting for this last GMP, so I would prefer to, that we, from a budgeting standpoint, we have all that work. If we know we're doing that work and we plan to do that work, I would prefer that we include that in the final GMP. I'm not sure that even if, from a sequencing standpoint, or if Dr. Brady is requesting that it's delayed a year, from my reading of the last buyout, it's the final completion. My memory may be wrong, but I think it said June of 2025. So if that's when you're finishing, can you include why did we exclude the bridge from
right.
a cost standpoint? Why not just make that a sequencing?
And if they're done in 23 using the bridge, then there's a 2 year. It just I'm not
right.
putting it together. So let's get somebody up there.
Because we talked about timing and escalation. So why are we not including this in the GMP now? And having that discussion versus is it? I think programming is our number one concern. But if it's going to delay our construction more or cost us more down the road because we're not including it now, my understanding it's always been part of our plan to include this. So to take it out now because a preference, it doesn't sound to me from Dr. Brady it's a must-have. It was a question of, can you delay it for, is it not going to happen for a year? So
Can I ask a question?
I have a question on the floor. I would love for it to be answered. So are you taking this one, Don?
Yes.
Thank you.
On the decision to exclude it, that was mine. I think I discussed this at length with you, Mrs. Wells, last week. If we're going to push out, is my understanding that it's not a year. It would be because of how the years start and stop, summers, is this would be work we'd want to do in a summer. So it ends up being 2 years, which would fit in the end of the construction at the end. It's not inherent to operate when what we're doing now doesn't change. It doesn't need to be demoed in order to work on Heath, for example. It's not, quote, in the way. There is work to be done, significant amount of work to be done that would be once the demo portion is done, the patch back on Building A and completing the patch on B3, B4. I made the decision to pull it out programmatically, and this is the reason. If we're going to bid something 2 years out from now and bid out the subcontractor prices 2 years out, I think that would not be in the district's interest today, in the market that we're experiencing today, to price something 2 years out. If the board wishes to have it demoed, I think the issue is If you want it priced now, that price I'm going to say would not be market price. That would be a bet, the best bet that the contractor would be able to put together for you. No one's comfortable in the next 6 months pricing, much less 24 months. In my opinion, if you want to demo it this summer or not use it for educational purposes, from our perspective programmatically, whenever we can, we make the priority the educational programming, and reconfiguration, we design, we change, we adapt scheduling across the district, not just at the high school. So in this case, if the board wishes to bid it out now, it would not be my recommendation. It would be a 24-month price because you would be bidding the work out in 24 months.
Isn't all of the work that's being done in this last lease back, it work in the future? It's not just the bridge. I mean,
No, it's
the
ongoing.
Landscaping and other hardscaping.
Well, it's not going to be. We're pricing it.
Isn't that 24
We're
months
pricing
out?
it for today. I think the issue that
But
I
how
would
is that
want.
market price? If that's
If
market
the board
price,
would like to have me price it out, please give that direction.
I mean, we certainly want the lowest prices that we can get for the work. So, to be really clear, that's our goal. If not locking in that price now, and it's to our advantage to have lower market pricing in the future, if that's what I'm hearing you say, that's just the first time that we've heard that there's lower market pricing in the future. What we've heard is there's
I made
escalation and higher
no reference to
market
that at all. I'm not saying it lower prices in the future. What I will say is this: the way this is structured, we have on B1, B2 is the lease-leaseback document. The lease-leaseback is that's the mothership.
Right.
Each of the things that we do are amendments. What I recommend to the board is that you have for B3, B4, a GMAX for the work that is currently under construction. The request to pull that scope of work out for 24 months, we can put it back in. I'm sure Randy would be happy to bid it. You can certainly do that. I won't recommend it. The board will have to give me direction to do that. If you want to do the bridge in 24 months, contractually, it would be an amendment to the lease-leaseback contract. So it isn't like it's, you could do a deferred price or an alternate, but that doesn't quite fit the way the program is designed contractually. It would be an amendment in the future time. But I think the board's interest would be to lock in the prices for the work that you're going to be building in the next 2 years.
So Don, I'm sorry, Mary. That begs the question for me that if we're not going to do that work until the summer of 24, that's what we're looking at, summer of 24. That would be the practical point to do that. And is it then irrelevant then of the high school using that bridge space that you pulled this? Would you have pulled it anyway? Because if you're not doing the work for 2 years.
No, we had scheduled that work, I believe, to do it as soon as possible this summer.
So do you have bids for that work currently? So do you have a price for that?
So that's starting to make sense. So originally, you would have bid it you wouldn't have excluded it because you were going to do it sooner than later.
The bids that we have today are irrelevant. If we're looking for doing the work in 2 years out, the bidders would need to bid that in that time frame, not this summer.
But if we decided to do it this summer and not
the board
then
can
is our
direct.
pricing better today with the bidding we have?
If you want to take it down this summer, then the best price would be to do it immediately. The best price is in the next 20 minutes would be your best price.
Take it down.
Okay.
The prices are escalating. I know I haven't had a chance to speak to you, and you haven't had a chance to speak to me for about 5 months now, but the prices that I reported to you in October were 22%. They are now above 35% at DSA, and that's changed in the last 3 months. Mm-hmm. So very concerned about the market price in the future. Not today. We know what it is today because it's bid today. It's bid very broadly bid. We have good coverage today that we didn't have before. However, 2 years from now, I wouldn't bid it today for 2 years. I would bid it 2 years from now.
Okay, so I'm drawing this line of logic that I'm starting to understand. Okay, so irrelevant from the educational program, which we have to get back to that point because it's very important, what's happening with the students. Originally, this scope of work was in this GMP, assuming it was going to be done this summer.
Correct.
Okay, so it's the delay now that caused it pulling. Not, you didn't pull it because he's using the, I'm not saying he, don't take it personally. I'm not saying because the bridge is going to be used for 2 years. It's just because you couldn't do it this summer. So
Yes.
it doesn't matter when, whether it's 23, 24, 25, it's because it couldn't be this summer. That's why it was pulled.
It changes the pricing.
Okay.
What I'd like to know is what the cost is to not do it this summer. So what is the price to do that work this summer? And
Versus 2 years?
Yes. Make a decision based on that.
We have Pro West
that
here,
cost.
excuse me, we have Pro West here. I don't think the confidence is here in me, so I'd
Okay.
like to have the owner of Pro West answer that question and all the rest of your questions.
Okay.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Randy. You may not be prepared to answer that question, but I think it's an evaluation of, for Michael, in terms of your needs and what the costs are.
And the student program needs
Right.
versus
Yeah, I'd be
versus
glad to
the
try
cost. Yeah.
to help answer
And
the
if there's
question.
alternatives.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
So there was a fair amount of confusion as to the schedule, what the start date would be for the bridge, based on what Dr. Breggy was saying. So without some kind of clear definition on when we can start that work, it's hard to nail down subcontract prices firmly. So I believe that was a primary reason why this was pulled from this amendment, because there was a lot of uncertainty involved in the schedule. So I'm still a little confused after hearing the discussion about exactly when we could actually do the work. If we knew when we could do the work precisely, then we could price it to the best of our ability. I agree wholeheartedly with what Mr. Blake is talking about in this market. It's a very agitated, highly escalating bid market across the board. It's been that way for 4 years, and you've been in the midst of that, and you've seen the pricing. The difficulty in having a subcontractor bid something that's not going to start for 2 years. Very difficult to ask them to do that, and they will increase their price significantly, since we're now asking them to take the risk of all kinds of unknowns.
Right, so to add in contingencies for that.
Yeah, it's not inconceivable that we could give you a price that we felt reasonably comfortable we could meet if the start date was the summer of 2024. If you told us that, we could come back and say, okay, we feel comfortable with the following prices. We could do that. But there was a fair amount of uncertainty prior to this meeting as to exactly what that start date would be. We want to do everything we can to accommodate the district.
Right.
So if you would like, we can certainly put that price together and provide some kind of risk assessment for ourselves and for the subcontractor, and we could come with an amendment to our contract at really any point in time.
Right. Would the sequencing, like from a sequencing standpoint, if Michael, based on pricing today versus in the future in 2024, would you have a sense of how much contingency they're putting in for that delay, so that we can evaluate? Is there?
It's going to be very difficult to get. First, it's going to be very difficult to get anybody to bid it at all. If I tell them that it's not going to start for 2 years. In this environment, there's so many projects to bid,
right,
and the estimators are so busy, they may or may not even respond to our request to bid. Now, what we could do...
I thought that you said you bid, that it was already currently being bid.
We have pricing based on a fairly quick start time, and we could evaluate...
When you say that, you mean this summer, fairly quick start time.
If that's the start... If that's the start date.
I don't think we could do it while kids are
if
in
it's
school.
If it's got to be done in the summer, we have pricing to start it, let's say, no later than the summer. We could meet with those contractors, and we could establish a reasonable risk assessment to push it off another 2 summers. We could do that.
and evaluate what the price, the cost to do that would be.
We're not really sure what the actual cost would be. It would be mostly a risk assessment and an escalation figure that everybody would have to be comfortable with.
Right.
And right now, I don't think it's very difficult to try to predict where this construction market's going to be in 2 years.
I'm just really trying to understand, like, should we be doing it this summer? Is it going to cost us a lot more?
Excuse me,
to
can I
delay
make
it
a comment and
is
have
it-
a question?
I want to get back to that, but let's
I would like a chance to get
Yeah,
a
I'm
word
sorry. Go
edgewise
ahead.
here. Okay, I am reading this amendment, do not see the word bridge at all. So I am wondering what it is that I am about to vote on or not vote on. Because how can I approve you're talking about a bridge. How is a bridge become a part of this motion? Is that something that is...
Rochelle, it's the last page of the whole contract. It's an Exhibit B.
It's an exclusion.
Randy, while I have a second. So what I'm trying to weigh here is for our decision as a board is, does the educational needs of the high school in changing and I keep pointing to Michael. Michael, I'm so sorry I keep pointing to you.
No, it's fine.
The educational needs of the high school are dictating a decision that could be a difference of 100,000, 500,000. We don't know that. So, and I don't know if anybody knows that. And what I'm hearing, there's no way to know it for real, but perhaps using just some basic escalation and calculation, you kind of have a general price of what it would be now, what it would be in 2 years. Is it worth us go back to save the administration, find another solution? The bridge is coming down. That's I don't know if that's kind of what you're thinking as well, Mary. But
so can I just say,
that's what I'm kind of trying to get.
The administration doesn't want to have any impact to the district, which is why that was discussed.
Well, I certainly hope the administration does have an impact to the district. That's
no, like we don't want this decision to have like an impact to the district, financially or in the sequencing of construction. But we've had really great conversations over the last 4 or 5 years with Reconfiguration about and partnering on programs, and that's why Reconfiguration has been so successful. This was the same type of conversation we've been having for 5 years, just an open dialogue about what do we need and what would be great if we had it, but if we don't have it, then we work around it, and we've been doing that successfully for 4 or 5 years. It's as simple as if that space is going to stay empty, can we use it? That's really what, why leave it empty if we can use it and we can move to the bungalows, out of there. But if we can't, then there's things that we will do internally.
Well, it's not that you can, it's that there's a financial impact to the construction program, is what I'm hearing from that decision. So
yes,
that's what I'm
It
trying
comes down to, is that a program request that you really need, or is this if it's happening this way, we'll use it? Because it's really that.
If it was empty, if it's empty, we can use it, and if not, then we have a plan B and a plan C for moving those 2 classes out of the bungalow.
So my suggestion would be then to get the pricing to do it now, if now is a better time to do it.
To take the bridge down.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah. So can we get that pricing from you?
So that pricing, we can bring that really to probably the next meeting of the board, which I believe is April 26th.
And then that would be an amendment.
That would be an amendment to the amendment we're asking for today.
Okay.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
And we should have the colleagues chime in on that, but I'm thinking.
Does that work for you, Michael?
It works great. This is what we've been doing for 4 and 5 years. So, having an amendment to this is, this is just really good discussion that we've had. This is why it's worked.
Part of it is this overriding question about programming and students, and I want to make sure that we're not making a penny wise, pound foolish decision that affects students also, Michael.
Right.
So that's why it's important for me to understand that you said there's a plan B and a plan C.
Right.
They'll be okay. The students will be okay. I would rather get the bridge back into the program.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So then we'll expect to see that amendment coming fairly soon to add to this as opposed to waiting. Does anyone have any other questions on this agreement?
So you're suggesting not writing the exclusion on this then, right, at this
No,
point?
we're gonna, I think
This
we're,
is excluded, but then they'll be
they'll
soon
bring it
thereafter
back.
You're
They'll
gonna
bring,
bring-
they'll bring the
add to
bridge
it,
back, yeah.
And then we'll be finished with B3 and B4, we hope. And the time frame to that. My only question is typically, I don't know, because I haven't been here for the previous lease-back agreements other than our El Rodeo and Terry was here. So I don't know, on this agreement, who negotiated this agreement, or is this typically just added because we already have the base, the mothership, as Don referenced, or someone referenced? Is this just an addition, or does this go through legal? How has this been vetted?
I'm going to have Don answer that question. I haven't been involved in that.
Okay, thank you.
Question yet.
He's just the owner. The rest of us do the work. Yes, it's a procedural process. We're following the same nomenclature, the same formatting, the same structure. If you look,
The same terms, so to speak?
Same terms, same conditions that was put together by legal in the beginning and reviewed up until this one. But this particular end is like, it's the same if you looked at El Rodeo, the final would look exactly like this one. We haven't changed anything. So it's not a negotiation in that sense. It is just simply pricing, monitoring market conditions, and agreeing that the price is accurate and is appropriate.
I have a question. It actually goes back to a previous, I want to say it's a lease back. It's when we took the contingency amount from B1 and B2, which I think was the $4.5 million that the district had, and we moved it to B3, B4. Is that adding to the district contingency that already existed? So we've increased the district contingency for B3, B4 by an additional 4.5, or?
Yes. By board resolution, we moved the costs, the amount less the final cost. Each of these projects have at the end basically cost plus a fee.
Right.
That's how they end. And so when there's in this particular case, we moved it to the owner's contingency, which in my assessment reflects the major risk on B3, B4. All those documents you saw out here, that represents your risk. So it's $4.5 million. So if you said, well, this price would reflect $4.5 million in the contingency amount in the total price.
Why did we want to add an additional $4.5 million to that contingency that we had already established? Or
I think it was a good decision on my part, as well as looking at the district's risk. We want to identify, as I've repeated, I won't go through it again, but on B3, B4, and El Rodeo, we have 4,000 requests for information, 674 changes to the contract documents, and 12 complete revisions to the drawing, unheard of in the history of DSA. And what it means is we are not able to, we meaning all of us, the construction team, the A&E team, when we go into the building is going to tell us what's going to happen, not the drawings, which is very unusual for a full seismic retrofit. Until you pull everything down, everything off of this room and pull it down and see the level of decay, or the differences. The 4,000 RFIs reflect the fact that the drawings were drawn from 1920 as-builts. From 1920 until today, we have no idea what changes or what was done or applications. So that's the starting point. On top of that, there's 10,000 to 8,000 line items of gap analysis that was done on the DSA approved set of drawings. It's massive. I've never experienced this in my career. I've talked with Doug Humphrey at DSA. He's never experienced anything like this. A project that has this many unknowns that have to be uncovered and then engineered, run the calcs, send it back to DSA, and bring it back. So when you saw all those documents that were here the last time we were here. What that means is, and why putting it in the district's contingency, not the contractor's contingency or the subcontractor's contingency, is giving the district that cushion for the unknowns that we think are significant in B3, B4. When an RFI is written, until we get a resolution, typically, in a normal job, from an RFI, go through, get the answer, 15 days, answer comes back. We get that answer out to the subs. The sub goes and bills it. We try to get that in one billing cycle. So the subcontractor, we process this. That's what this whole team of people do every day. With these, an RFI that turns into revised RFI that turns into a CCD, a change construction document, is 9 to 12 months before we get it back to the sub. So in the meantime, we have to develop work where we can develop workflow and work through all of these changes to keep production going. That's why I say we don't use a CPM, typical CPM schedule, which normally you would do in a project. These are schedules that are developed on a weekly basis for flow. Now that's a long way around to answer the question, why did I put it there? Because the district's risks is in the district's unknowns. At some point, we will be using that money for, there are definitely things that are unknowns, dirt, soil, things that are critically not seen or not understood by the architect or not understood by the contractors, that leaves the district with, well, this is ours. So far on B1, B2, we've had we're correcting some accounting that were inappropriately charged to district. It was a clerical error at Arrowdale. Arrowdale, B1, B2, and B3, B4, we have not accessed the district's contingency yet.
But when the project is completed, we
Yes.
split that leftover contingency with Pro West.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. That brings up one other thing that comes to mind. In the contract, I believe I read that the completion date, the final completion date, is contingent on items not being, assuming that things are not being stuck with DSA. I think that might be the language. Does something to that effect?
Yes.
Are there items that are, other than the CCDs, other items that are still
I don't.
unknown or
yes.
being hung up at DSA that would prompt putting that in the agreement, or is that standard?
Well, like I say, there's about 600 of them, and half of them in some form or another have been processed. But it's not so much how many today. We're anticipating that in the next 12 months, that there'll be additional. How many? I think that the risk, we're not out of the structural on B3, B4 yet. We're not out of the dirt in B3, B4. So we expect those CCDs to continue at the rate that we've seen so far, and that will have an impact. It depends on how many and how many it takes to execute and resolve that. I would say my experience is DLR's A&E team, as well as the structural engineers, have worked through sometimes good, and I would say at this point between Pro West and the work of DLR's architectural, more importantly, the structural engineer, Robert Randall, the project is Robert Randall. The structural engineer is really the one who has to move this. Moving it, if it's an architect, you just answer the question. I have a question, what do I do with this wall? When it's structural, he has to calculate it as if he's starting over. That's the time. So we've done pretty amazing job. When someone asks, I hope someday someone asks before I'm through here, someone should ask me someday, well, why does it take so long? And why does it cost this much? I haven't been asked that question. That would be a good question for the board to discuss.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm going to call for the vote. I'm going to call for a roll call vote. Mr. Raymer?
Yes.
Mrs. Marcus?
Yes.
Mr. Halimi?
Yes.
Dr. Stern?
Yes.
Mr. Margot?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. The next item on the agenda is item F, approval of Amendment 35 to the agreement with DLR Group for architect fees for the modernization of Beverly Hills High School. May I have a motion?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Mr. Halimi. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote for Mr. Raymer.
I'll make a motion for the approval of change order number 1 to the agreement with Kazoni Inc. for bid number 2021-005 BV modifications.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Mr. Margot and seconded by Mr. Halimi. Any questions? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. The next item is
I'll call for the ratification of a professional services agreement with Environment Audit Inc. to provide real-time air monitoring at the former Veneco oil well site located at the high school.
I'll second. Any questions?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. The next item on the agenda is approval of a lease agreement extension with William Scotsman for 2 modular buildings occupied by the Facilities and Construction Department and 5 modular buildings occupied by Special Ed at the Beverly Hills High School. May I have a second?
I'll second.
The motion was made by me and seconded by Mr. Margot. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll
The
move
motion-
for the approval of amendment
Motion-
number 5 to the agreement with Geo Instruments to provide perimeter dust, vibration, and sound monitoring services at Beverly Hills High School.
I'll second. On the previous item, the motion passed 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. Any questions on this item?
No, but judging by the date, we're going to revisit this after June? Yes. Okay, thank you,
Yes.
Wayne.
I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 with a preferential vote from Mr. Raymer. The next item on the agenda is the approval of amendment number 5 to the agreement with Geo Instruments.
We just
Did
did
I
that.
see that one?
Yeah, we just did that. Well, on to reports,
I
and I
apologize.
just
I
because of the
still approved
time,
it. Yeah.
President Wells, because of the time, I don't know if we want to abbreviate the end of the meeting. I know we need to approve the number 16A, but I don't know if we want to.
I just have a quick question for my report. Per the board direction, the weekly testing, it concludes on April 22nd, which is the week after we come back from spring break. And so we had talked about during that last week of testing if we wanted to do just do the current testing, what we're doing now, or if we wanted to do an even split between the testing vaccinated and unvaccinated students evenly for that last week. And so that's just a quick question for the board. As you know, I've been providing you with information and updates. There's just been a slight uptick in cases since the optional masking has gone into play.
Eli?
I'd be in favor of just leaving it as it is for the last week. I'd see no reason to change it.
I agree. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I am going to table, actually very quickly, I'm going to approve item 16A, approval of resolution 2021-2022-22, continuing authority to hold virtual meetings pursuant to AB 361. I'll make a motion. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by me and seconded by Mr. Raymer. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 with preferential vote for Mr. Raymer. I'm going to table for the rest of the meeting our superintendent report, student board member report, and communication from board members so that we may all go to the installation of our new mayor, Lily Bossy, and Vice Mayor Julian Gold, and to honor our current mayor, Bob Wunderlich. And I would like to just, on behalf of our board, thank the Honorable Mayor Robert Wunderlich for his service for the past year. And we are very grateful for your service, and welcome the Honorable Lily Bossy and Julian Golden. We look forward to this next coming year. At that, I will adjourn the meeting. It is 6:41. Thank you, everyone.